for the bigger clouds in order to maximise their cross-country speeds. To win that day, they would have definitely had to fly with full tailwind and fly towards the emerging clouds and get past it before it turns into a line of thunderstorms or indeed some larger cells.
After launching, the paragliders form into groups known as gaggles. Due to a southerly wind, most pilots in the first gaggle elect to fly north. With the clock already ticking, they need to quickly navigate past the areas of atmospheric instability that lie ahead. "60 minutes into the launch window, the German team prepares to take off.
We didn't want to take off very early. We decided to let some people fly, so the air is marked. The thermals are already marked by the other pilots, so you can fly faster just following them.
Ava makes her pre-flight checks and sets her GPS track log to record.
As we realized we have a southerly wind, we knew we have to fly north between those clouds. But they were that far that at the moment at the takeoff, it was not really looking like a big danger.
You could see the clouds forming and popping up all over the places, that there was more activity to the north, but there was no real thunderstorm or pre-thunderstorm seen at that time.
But Ava's friend, Austrian paraglider Gerald Emerseder, is already concerned about the possibility of a thunderstorm.
When I first arrived at Mount Bora and I saw these clouds, I was sure inside that the day will be not good. I was sure about the humidity. I was sure about the possibility of thunderstorms inside of me. I was sure. But this is the problem with competitions. I felt a little pressure because I was in a competition, and you go flying.
Freak storms are one of the biggest risks to paragliders at the top of their game. It's the one element they can't control. Once in the air, they're in constant radio contact with their ground crews, who monitor the weather and follow the pilots cross-country to retrieve them from their landing points.
The first time I radio Stefan was when I was at the cloud base.
Hier ist Eva für Stefan. Ich bin 20 Kilometer vom Startplatz, Höhe über 2000 Meter und Flugrichtung Nord. Alles klar bei mir.
The first part of the flight was actually easy. I followed the ridge north, and I think about 20 km, then the ridge stops and the flatlands begins.
At the time when people were launching and flying, and for the first hour or two of their flight, they thought it was a relatively standard cross-country day, very unremarkable in every respect. The group split up into two, so Eva was actually at the rear end of the lead group, so the front runners in her group were already through the section of clouds before the clouds started to get really big and strong above their heads.
Gerald is now flying alongside Ava at the back of the lead gaggle.
I knew about the problem with the clouds, but in a race we try to find good thermals. So on this day, our strategy was for our team to go between these clouds and to fly north as long as possible.
50 meters to their right is 42-year-old He Zhongpin, a member of the national Chinese team.
Zhongpin had been flying since the 90s, and he was one of their senior pilots in the team, so the rest of the younger members of the team respected him. He was up there with the top pilots in the world, so he was right mixing it with them at that exact stage.
A handful of pilots have successfully navigated a course past the developing storm. A small cloud in front of Ava, Gerald and Zhongpin stands between them and clear skies.
It was clear that the lead group that Eva was in would be coming quite close to those larger clouds, and they'd be running a fine gauntlet between two of the larger cells.
The clouds were really black and big, and I started to get worried about it. I started to get concerned.
The two big clouds were growing really fast. We could see that it's getting very dark, so we knew we are playing with the fire now. But in front of us, the sky was looking really nice with nice cumulus clouds. Everybody was thinking, okay, we are fast enough to fly away from this cloud.
Being an XC Open, the pilots get to make their own decisions once they start flying. How you predict the weather to be is your own personal safety, and it can be the difference between life and death sometimes. So from the viewpoint of the pilots who were in the rear group, it was clear that up ahead there was a solid line of cloud developing. Most of the rear group elected to land at that stage.
Nach 50, 60 Kilometern wurde es mir einfach viel zu heiß in der Luft. Also meine Schwelle war erreicht, wo ich einfach dachte, jetzt wird es zu gefährlich. Und dann funkte ich Stefan an und sagte, mir wird es jetzt zu gefährlich, ich gehe jetzt runter. Und in dem Augenblick habe ich dann gar nicht mehr realisiert, wo Eva dann auch war. Aber kurz vorher war sie noch einen Kilometer vor mir.
As dozens of pilots start going to ground, the severity of the storm cell is becoming apparent.
The clouds were forming into very high clouds, and it started to rain. We knew there's a big difference between thunderstorms in mountain terrains and in flatlands, but actually at that time we underestimated it, of course.
We could see a very tall, towering cumulonimbus cloud just reaching its mature phase, where it was starting to develop very, very quickly, and some rain was just starting to appear on one corner of it.
I had a cloud in front of me. I knew I cannot pass below the cloud, otherwise I get sucked into the cloud with the thermal, so I decided to fly around.
On the flatlands around Manila, storms normally develop slowly over a matter of hours. But today, the clouds are growing rapidly, forming a line of cumulonimbus cells. If these cells merge, they will create a severe thunderstorm. The developing small cloud the pilots are trying to fly around suddenly gets sucked into the larger clouds, creating a massive storm cell, now measuring 20 kilometers wide.
Eva, being at the back end of the lead group, would have seen the leaders flying away from her, and she was desperately trying to catch them, of course, to stay in contention. She would have seen a little bit of blue still ahead, but what she wouldn't have seen was how tall the clouds were and how dark and menacing they looked at that point. Because from where we were behind, we could see this tall, towering stuff, and once you're underneath it, you can't quite tell. She wasn't alone, of course. She was with a few other very competitive pilots.
In paragliding competitions, you are focused on winning, you push the limits, you just forget your safety and your life. It's kind of adrenaline and emotions, you just focus.
For me, it was a race against time. I saw two Swiss pilots in front of me, I think about 500 meters. They flew between the clouds really fast. Made it. They are flying out. And I remember that I tried the same. We were not fast enough. The two clouds started to growing up to one cloud. It was like the cloud catched me and there was no chance to get out of it.
The clouds came together to form one very large cloud, and when that occurred, it was basically game over for Eva and the other pilots with her. It was like a giant hoover sucking them up to great heights, and they couldn't do anything about it at that point.